What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Mohawk Motors. So if you've been following along, hopefully you're as excited as I am. We're gonna get this engine put back together today and hopefully have it running before I run out of time. Let's get this thing back together, plumbed up, fired up, and see how she sounds. Okay, here we go. I've got my engine surface deck cleaned, got all my parts cleaned up, ready to go. So I'm going to poke this thing back together, fairly straightforward. I'm using new head gaskets this time because I suspect the old head gaskets were leaking. So there's really not much to this. Put it back together just like you took it apart. I like to put a little copper spray on my gaskets. Some people like to just put them in dry. It's really your preference, whatever you like to do. I like the copper spray because it makes the gasket a little tacky, and I feel like it helps it seal up a little bit better. Reduces the chance of error. These are the 862 cylinder heads we cleaned up in a previous video. So let's get the head bolts into this thing and get it torqued down. Alright, well, we're getting there. We're chipping away at it. Lots of little things to get hooked back up and put back in place. I've got the heads back on both sides. I've got the rocker arms and everything put back in place. I spun the engine over by hand a few times to make sure that there was no binding or contact or anything like that, and it spins over freely by hand, which is good. Drained the old oil out. I put new oil in. I put a new oil filter on it. So pretty much all that's left now, I need to get the intake manifold back in place, then get all of the wiring hooked back up, and then I'll get the radiator, fan, that stuff put back in place, and then we'll try to fire this thing up. I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to mess with the tune, but I'm going to see. It might start on the factory tune, it might not, so I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens, and we'll just do the best we can for the rest of the day. Alright, I think I've got this thing ready to at least be cranked over for the first time. I've spun it over several times by hand. There's no interference, there's nothing hitting, no problems, so I know I'm not going to have any valves crashing into pistons or anything like that. I've got all the wiring connected back up. I pulled the fuel pump relay and I don't have any spark plugs in it. I want to crank it over a little bit before there's any compression in the cylinders, just to make sure I have oil pumped all up through the system again. It's filled with oil, it's got a new oil filter on it, and I also replaced the power steering pump while I had it apart. So that's been filled with power steering fluid. I jacked the truck up, turned it side to side to bleed all the air out of the power steering system. So I'm gonna crank it over a few times, make sure that everything's moving the way it should and free, and there's oil pumped up into the galleys. And then I'll throw the spark plugs in it, put the fuel pump relay back, and we'll see if it'll start. Okay, let's crank this thing over and see what happens. It should be nothing, it should just crank. There we go. Let's do one more. Now, I'm gonna do a compression test on this number 5 cylinder before I put everything else back in it. Hopefully we fixed the problem. My only thing that I can think of that could have been causing it was the head gasket. I didn't see any obvious damage anywhere else, anything obviously wrong. The valves in the head look okay. So we've got these heads rebuilt. I know they seal well. I know everything is good on those. And I put brand new head gaskets in it, so I should have good compression in cylinder number 5 now. Okay, let's crank this thing over. Oh, fingers crossed. Please have good compression. And that sounded like it. You gotta be kidding me. That looks like even less than before. That is less than before. What is going on in this thing? That's not cool. We just did a hell of a lot of work. All right, might have been some false panic. I compression tested the other cylinders. They're all pretty low. Like 45, 60 PSI. So I'm hoping it's just that the oil has all washed off the piston rings. So I put the fuel pump relay back in, and I'm gonna try to start it and see what happens. It might start, it might not start because of the cam. If it doesn't start because of the cam, then I'll have to adjust the tune in the PCM and then try again. But let's see if it'll kick off how it is. All right, we should have fuel in it now. Now we've got a dead battery. All right, let's charge the battery. Okay, I've had the battery charger on it for a couple of minutes. Let's see if it'll start now. least it started. That's a good sign. Now I just need to figure out if that cylinder 5 is still misfiring. I'm gonna check the computer. It's got a flashing check engine light. All the critical functions look good. Oil pressure is good, everything else. So I suspect it's just really angry about that cam. So we'll check that. It's also, none of the O2 sensors are plugged in, so I'm sure it's not happy about that either. So I'll pull the codes out and make sure that it's not something that's going to cause damage. And then, geez, probably try to get some kind of exhaust on this thing. It is loud. Okay, I pulled the codes. It's O2 sensor codes and evap solenoid code and random multiple cylinder misfire code. I'm pretty sure the multiple cylinder misfire code is because of the camshaft. I'm pretty confident all the other stuff is because the O2 sensors aren't plugged in. So I don't see any codes that indicate a substantial problem that we need to be worried about. So I want to start it back up. I want to let it run for a couple minutes to make sure everything's lubricated, everything's got plenty of oil, that the rings are able to get oiled up again, because all the oil probably ran out of those when I was cleaning everything off. And then I'll probably work on getting I'll adjust the tune so the tune's not as, so it's not as angry. Yeah, so here, I'm going to start it back up again. The engine's up to temperature, so the computer, it wants to go to low idle, and it's not going to be able to idle at its 500 RPM warm low idle set point. So I'll have to adjust the tune a little bit, and then we'll come back out and see if we can't determine for sure if we fix the compression issue in cylinder number 5. All right, so I went in using HP tuners. I made some changes to accommodate the cam, and let's try it now. I think now it'll idle. It's not going to be a great idle, but I think it will idle enough that I can work on getting it adjusted and set to where it needs to be. That's interesting. I wonder why it shut off. Very odd. I have to look at this. I think I got it! Haha! The face of victory! I let it run for a little while. I let it cool back off so I could put the compression tester in without burning the heck out of my hands. And cylinder 5, within 5 to 10 psi compression cranking as all the other cylinders. So I'm gonna take that as a sign that it was in fact the head gasket leaking, and the new head gasket fixed it. We've got our new heads on, well, new to this engine. Our new camshaft in. We've got it to a point that it'll start and idle. I'm super pumped. I have some other odds and ends to fix on this truck. It's got a blown brake line and some other things, but I'm gonna throw the engine covers back on this because the engine work is done for now. All right, everybody, that's it for this video. We've got this thing running on all 8 cylinders. We got the new camshaft installed. We got our 862 heads installed to bump up the compression ratio. I'm super excited. I can't wait to get this thing on the road. I've got a couple more little odds and ends, a broken brake line, and a few other things to take care of before we can get it out for a test drive, but it's not going to be long now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm looking forward to sharing the rest of this project with you. And until next time, take care.